In this video, you'll be learning about switch blocks and how to complete guided practice number 4. We're looking at NetBeans now, and I've created a new guided practice 4 project. I've included an import statement for the scanner class. And down in the main now, I want to go ahead and just declare a couple of variables. Well, let me actually tell you where we're headed here. We're going to create a little program using a switch block that will allow the user to enter a value and then make a choice from several choices of whether they want the value to be squared, cubed, or be shown the square root of the value. So to get started, we'll just create a declaration here for value and choice. Those will be the two variables that we'll be using. And then we want to create a instance of our scanner. So that's equal to new scanner, system in. Next, I want to create a prompt then for the user to enter a value. So we'll do a system.out print line, enter a value, or better yet, let's say enter a number. And then we'll go ahead and take that value variable and assign it the input from the user using our instance of scanner and its next int method. Guess I should fix that. I don't think the user is going to understand what an inat is, so let's fix that to enter a number. Now we'll create some prompts here to have the user enter an operation. So first we'll type in system.out.println enter an operation colon, and then a system.out.println and then we'll start with the first choice here, which will be to square the value. So if they select number 1, we'll create a case here in a second for number 1, which will then square the value that was input. This is a string, so let's make sure we enter it as a string. And then the next prompt is just identifying the second choice that we'll offer the user. So that's going to be option 2. They can cube the value. Not doing good on my print lines here. And then one more here, system out print line. And that'll be choice number 3. We'll calculate the square root of the value. So this is the choices that we want to offer the user. And so the next thing that we'll want to do here is actually take the choice from the user. So let's go ahead and use our choice variable and assign to it our in.next int method. So now that we have that choice value, now we can create a switch block that will operate on that choice. So depending on the number that the user types in, choice number 1, 2, or 3, we want to indicate now in the switch block what each of those choices should do. And so the way a switch block works is we use the keyword switch, and you pass into the parentheses the value that you want to switch on. So based on whatever that value is, we will then compare it inside of the switch block and assign a task or an action to that choice. Now, in a switch block, we refer to these as cases. So for case 1, meaning case the user types in 1, we will output a string that reads the square is, and then in parentheses we'll perform the actual mathematical operation that we want to occur here, which would be to take the value that the user typed in and multiply it times itself. And actually, I want to make this a little bit more informative. So let's say the square of, and then actually display the value that was typed in by the user, and then concatenate that with the word is. Let's see, we've already got a space there, so we don't need a space there, but we will want to have a space here. So the value of, and then we'll display the actual value is, and then go ahead and concatenate that with the squaring of the value. What did we miss here? Probably a plus sign. Let's see, we've got the square of plus value plus is plus value. This should not be inside of a quote. There we go. So only the string values go inside of the double quotes, and then when we're concatenating an actual variable name, we don't use the quotes. So it's string plus, here's the actual value, and then another string portion, which is plus, and then the result of multiplying value times value. So that's our first case. Now the thing about cases is when you have multiple cases, the way that a switch works is it'll actually just keep running through each of the cases if we don't add a break statement after each case. So that's an important component of a case, is to make sure that you always add the break in there. So now we want to add in our next case, which is going to be case 2. So in case the user types in the value of 2, we'll type in system. In fact, actually make this a little quicker. Let's cheat a little bit and just copy this block here, this statement here. Go ahead and paste that in there along with our break. We should have just copied both at the same time. Just makes it a little bit quicker. So then, so we've got the square. Then next we want to have the cube of the value is, and so now we just add one more multiplication operation there with value. Then we'll go ahead and generate case 3. So case 3, we want to change it now to the square root of our value is. And now to get the square root, what we want to do is we want to use one of the objects that comes with the Java library, a math object, and its square root method. So what we want to do is just replace our previous mathematical operation here now then with a call to the math object. Now you don't have to create an instance of the math object because it's a static class, and that means that no instance is required, so you can just type it in and use it right away within your program. So it's math is the class, and then it has a square root method. And then in the parentheses for the square root method, now we're going to find the square root of value. Now there is one little problem here, which is that depending on the value that's typed in, it may need to generate decimal places. And since value is an int, what we need to do here is actually convert our int value to a double to allow for having decimal places. And so it's really easy to do that. What you do is a process called casting. And casting works like this. You just create two parentheses right before your variable name, and then type in the data type that you want to cast the variable to the right to. So value, which is an int type, now will be converted to a double type for the purposes of our math.square root operation. And then the last thing that you want to do in a switch block is to have a default statement. And in this case here, if the user didn't type in values 1, 2, or 3, then that would be an incorrect value that was input. So we'll just indicate that by using a system.out.println. And so default should be all lowercase. I don't know why I typed a capital D in there. So let's go ahead and take a look at running our program here now. So we're being asked to enter a number. Let's put in the number 4. And then to enter an operation. So let's go ahead and square it. So we'll type in the value 1. And we get the square of 4. And we do need a space there. Is 16. So let's go back and correct that. It's going to be wrong in all these statements here. So because it's coming after value. So it's not picking up the space over here. There's no space after the actual value, so that's why we have to add that space in there. So we'll save that. Let's run it again. This time we'll type in, let's say 9, and we'll cube 9. The cube of 9 is 729. That's correct. So let's run it one more time here. Let's go ahead and type in the number 81, and then find the square root of 81. So we put in the operation number 3, and then we find the square root of 81 is 9. So that's pretty much how a switch statement or a switch block, you can refer to it either way, how a switch statement works. You first have a value that is being switched on. So in this case it was the choice that the user was entering, 1, 2, or 3. And then in the body of the switch block, you've got the case statements, so it's always the keyword case followed by whatever the value is. We use numbers here. It could be a text entry. And you should always have for each case a break at the end of your statement blocks for the case, because you could have multiple statements here. And then also you should always have a default. So break just prevents the switch from falling through, as they call it. There's an example, you can find it online, where you're testing for weekdays versus weekends. And so all the weekdays fall under the same case and weekends on a different case. And so it allows all the different choices of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to fall through and get the same output, which is to identify it as a weekday. So you can look that one up online if you're curious to see that example. But the break prevents that fall through from happening. So it basically runs the statement within the case that is matched with the choice, and then it breaks out of the switch block. The default is there so that if the value that we're identifying in our case as the choice, if that isn't a value that was typed in by the user, we want to be able to, this is like the else in an if-else statement. This is the catch-all statement, or catch-all portion of the switch block is default. So that way if we don't match any of these cases up here, then we can always make sure that we have an output to identify essentially what the problem was, why we didn't match a case. So now for the guided practice, I want you to do basically the same thing here, but change it up a little bit. Instead of using the mathematical operations I demonstrated here, which were squaring, cuting, I just saw that cubing. And then square root. What I'd like you to do is add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So give that a shot. That's your guided practice number 4. Till next time, happy coding.